Welcome back to RealTalkTwinCities.com. I'm Eric Pirius with Bell Mortgage, along with
Cheryl Kempenet, Coldwell Burnet.
and
Donna, Quanrud, Coldwell Burnet.
and we have a special guest with us.
Elise Jensen with Azure Wealth Management.
She's a certified financial planner. She's going to be joining us a little bit later to talk about the emotional traps involved with financial planning and owning real estate. And we were talking about financial traps just last segment, right, Cheryl?
We were just reviewing some of them, and we were talking lastly about the price reduction paralysis.
Right.
And one of the things I wanted to add to that is when we're listing the property, we need to have a strategy for price reductions if that should come up. So we talk about the timing, we talk about how many showings there are, the feedback that we get, and importantly, we need to pay attention to the properties that are selling and new properties coming on the market. Always watching the competition, why did they buy something else and why didn't they buy our listing? And we're in this together. We want you to get as much money as possible.
Absolutely.
And when we do get an offer, there's so much controversy over the first offer. Never take the first offer because it's always going to be the lowest one, or taking the first offer because it's always going to be the best one. And my philosophy is we want to take every offer seriously, and when that offer comes in, we want to keep the conversation going, and we want to try to pull this together, because you do typically realize the highest price with the shortest amount of marketing time.
That's correct. I always say somebody's raised their hand and said they like your house. So it's time to put the emotions aside and not be defensive and see how we can meet in the middle somehow. And keep the ball moving, just like you said, Cheryl. I think that's so important because we have three options. We can say no, we can counter, or we can accept the offer. And most of the time, don't you find we are countering whatever comes in as far as an initial offer?
Exactly. I try to keep the word rejection out of the vocabulary and really pull them together. I just sold a property where we were pretty far apart, actually, like $100,000 apart.
That's far.
And it was really far apart, but we pulled it together, and ironically, the seller got more than they thought they were going to, and the buyer got a better deal than they thought they were going to. So if we would have been firm, we would have rejected, the property would still be on the market today.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What about lowball? I know that you've got a couple more coming up. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, and hovering at showings. But before we get to that, I've noticed that a lot of folks really want to do lowball offers, and to me that seems counterproductive. I don't know if it falls in the emotional trap part of it, but it seems to me that that can be counterproductive. In other words, might put off the seller, or I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, and that does happen. A lot of times a seller will take it personally, but what I try to remind everybody is don't take it personally, don't get emotional. The person likes your house, but everybody thinks that they're an expert. They've got Zillow, they've got the county tax records, they're doing their own market analysis out there. So what we have to do as the listing agent and the seller, we've got to go back and we have to sell the other agent and sell the buyer on why we feel we have a higher value in the property.
Everybody wants a deal.
Yeah.
So if they can get a little bit off, whether it be compromise on the price or some of the terms, closing date, whatever, they're going to try. A lot of buyers go from the attitude of, well, I'll never know unless I tried.
Right.
Sure.
And sometimes they can't afford to go higher, and it's a house they really love, so
Right.
they do want to try. And sometimes our sellers have got mortgages and closing costs, and they can't go any lower. So there are certainly times when we can't pull it together.
What's
Right.
hovering at showings? Some of these I'm familiar with, but that one I'm dying to know. How is that an emotional trap? Or I don't get it.
Well, there could be a rare occasion when you have to be home for a showing. Most of the time, we encourage our sellers to not be there, because if the seller is there and they're pointing out things or they're just hovering around, it's an uncomfortable feeling,
Sure.
and the buyer and their agent can't freely have a conversation about things. Or the goal is to keep them in the home as long as we can so that they can really see and emotionally be moving their furniture into the house or connecting with it emotionally. And if you're there and you're passionate about your home and you're pointing out the lovely things that your kids' trophies or whatever it is, it can really be a distraction and very difficult and
Sure.
very uncomfortable.
Right, and
Yeah.
if I'm with a buyer and I'm in a home and the seller is there, I'm gonna get as much information as I can out of that seller, and I'm
Yes.
gonna use that in my negotiations.
Yes.
I'm gonna know their motivation, I'm gonna know what makes them tick, and then I'm just going in for the kill to get the best price for my client. So you're better off to not be home.
Right.
The
Be
fangs
forewarned.
come out.
Yeah. Cheryl's
All right.
coming.
I'm gonna get you.
All you buyers out there, you want Cheryl on your side.
Gonna get you the best deal, right, Elise?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Okay, one other thing we really wanna talk about too is don't count your chickens before they hatch. We go through the whole emotional process of negotiating, getting that purchase agreement tight, and then the seller thinks we're done, it's over, but no, it's not. We still have all of our contingencies to get through. And
I
so we wanna make sure that you understand that it's a process. We've gotta get through the inspections, then we're gonna be renegotiating again, then we've gotta get through the appraiser coming through, making sure that the value is there, and then babysitting the loan officers to make sure that they're on top of everything
What?
and working with the, not you, Eric, the
Oh,
loan guy, we know
sorry.
you're on top of things.
Well, and then the repairs, maybe there's a punch list of repairs that you have to do, and you've gotta get that done before they do a final walkthrough, or a
Sure.
week before, just to make sure that they can come back in and make sure that they were done, and done to their, liking. So don't ever count your chickens before they hatch.
Right. Yeah, and the loan commitment is another part of that process perhaps, because you're talking about not counting your chickens before they hatch. You accept an offer as a seller, the purchase agreement is accompanied by a pre-approval letter, meaning they're pre-approved. However, generally at that point, the buyer has not been through underwriting fully. They've provided, had their credit pulled, provided income documentation, and got an automated approval, or even an eyeball approval in some cases. But the loan commitment, that might be another, place where you could, a marker where, then you could maybe you could count a couple of chickens at that point. But prior to that, you shouldn't.
Exactly. The underwriter is our least favorite person in the whole transaction. They can be a deal
They
killer.
may be nice people, but just their function, right?
So
I'd say
you-
the same is true in my world as well, guys.
Underwriting, sure. So the emotional trap would be, building, let's say you're gonna get 60 grand and spending that 60,000 in your mind. And then
Right.
finding out that, something happened with this buyer, we gotta put it back on the market, and that could be emotionally devastating as compared to, we're hopeful, don't count your chickens before they hatch, and so that's what you're talking about there?
Exactly. And
Okay.
the other thing too, when you're selling your home and you're working with your realtor, you wanna make sure when that offer comes in that you have an estimate of proceeds filled out, so that you have a really good idea when you get to closing, how much money will be in your pocket. I know there's
Gotcha.
a lot of people that just,
Right.
they've never seen that, they get to closing and they were expecting tens of thousands of dollars more than what they're actually getting, and it can be a big surprise.
Yeah, I imagine so.
From a financial planning standpoint as well, I see a lot of people that are near retirement or in retirement that get emotionally attached to the dollars they're going to receive when they liquidate their home and don't realize that it's not nearly enough to support them throughout retirement, let alone if they have any kind of long-term care needs. So oftentimes that home nest egg is not as large as they feel like it is.
Yeah, people are surprised when they keep on living. You've gotta have more money, cause they're not gonna change their way of spending.
Yeah,
And long-term care, boy, that's something that a lot of us don't think about.
yeah, absolutely.
So that's Elise Azur with Wealth Management.
At
and
least
Azur.
Jensen,
Elise,
Elise Jensen with Azure Wealth Management.
I was close.
all right,
They both have
I'm
letters
kicking
in
them
them.
under the table now.
Elise the financial planner.
A lot of letters in these words, so confusing.
I have alphabet soup behind my name, I'm sorry.
You did your
A to
own
Z.
intro, you got me all confused. A certified financial planner with Azure Wealth Management, and she just brought up one of the emotional traps that can happen with financial planning. So I presume a lot of it's very similar, isn't that right, Elise?
Oh, absolutely. I think every reason that people's financial planning fails comes down to emotional traps, regardless of whether or not a home purchase is factored into that equation. But the biggest one that I see is that very few people actually consult with a certified financial planner prior to a home purchase. And they go and they get the financing and they get everything taken care of, and then all of a sudden they find themselves on the other end of the home purchase not adequately able to save for retirement because too much of their monthly income is being gobbled up by home expenses. So that's I would strongly encourage individuals to reach out, find somebody that's qualified, and that in itself even can be very confusing with the multitude of titles in the industry these days. Reach out and find a certified financial planner that can help you walk through what it actually looks like to buy a $150,000 home or a $200,000 home.
And Elise, how would they contact you?
I can be reached at 651-300-2456. Again, that's 651-300-2456. Or you can go to my website, Azure Wealth Management, AZURE, wealthmanagement.com.
Gotcha. And so you could conceivably just consult. In other words, you're a fee-based financial planner, correct?
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, so you could help folks figure out, hey, should I do 20% down or 10%, or what is this going to do to me financially next year with the write-offs and that kind of thing?
Yep, absolutely. That's
Okay.
exactly what I do.
We're going to be right back with Elise and more on financial planning and how that ties into real estate, as well as some more of the emotional traps you can fall into on realtalktwincities.com, AM 1280 The Patriot.